Joining us, staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now contributor McKay Coppins to talk about the religious side of this. And senior advisor for the Lincoln Project, Stu Stevens, to talk about the is he mentally aware side of this. These questions are pervasive, Stu, and it's not just journalists that are asking them or Democrats who are asking them. Polling shows that a lot of Americans, Republicans as well, wonder if the president has the same mental fitness as he used to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's almost a question that we need to ask because you can't believe that someone who wasn't having these issues would do what Trump does. But this goes back a long way with Trump. And I think one of the more extraordinary things here is not that Donald Trump is doing this, but there is no one around him that can stop him. No one that can say, hey, look, boss, this thing about you being Jesus, that's not good. And, they are playing with such destructive political forces here. I worked in the 2004 Bush-Kerry race. Kerry was a Catholic. We looked at these voters carefully every day. And in the end of the day, Bush won the Catholic vote 54-46. And had he not, he would have not been elected president. So there's something I think that is out of control here that really disturbs people. And when you put it in a picture of a guy who's starting a war that nobody wants, it's deeply, deeply disturbing.
McKay, have you noticed something different about this time around?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned at the beginning the fact that this comes in the midst of his decision to post a meme that depicted himself as Jesus Christ. And I think for a lot of people who maybe are not religious, not Christians, they see that as a symptom of his own ego and grandiosity and arrogance. And certainly it is that. But if you are a Christian, you're a Catholic, any kind of person of faith, really, you recognize that for what it is, which is blasphemy. It is profoundly offensive to Christians. And really, I do think underscores questions about President Trump's fitness. Maybe it's his mental fitness, maybe it's his moral fitness, but the fact that in these final years of his political career, he seems to be becoming more grandiose, more obsessed with, his own legacy, his sense of kind of immortality. And then to post a photo like that, I think it does really rattle people. And I can't tell you how many people I have spoken to, some of them Christian Trump supporters, some of them kind of center-right Christians who have made peace with Trump as president or who try to ignore him, who have told me in the last 24, 48 hours how much it offended them to see that meme. I think that really does have a lot to do with the reaction that you're seeing to his feud with the Pope.
I know it's saying a lot when I'm mentioning that people are asking if he's the Antichrist. But the reason I bring that up is that Tim Miller was hearing about this the other day. There's been some tweets about it as well. And I wonder if calling him something that extreme, McKay, helps justify their support for him up until now. Well, we were fooled. It was the devil fooling us. And this man came and he promised us so much, but maybe it's not my fault necessarily. Maybe this was a very clever trick that he's been pulling on all of us.
That's interesting. That basically there's a kind of swinging of the pendulum from thinking of him as God's anointed leader to now I have to think of him as, the devil incarnate or the Antichrist. I don't know. There might be something psychologically to that. And I should say that I would not say that, any political figure, including Donald Trump, is the Antichrist. But yeah. I do think that that there is a feeling of being duped that you see. And I think it's also in keeping with the policy decision. The decision to go to war with Iran is profoundly unpopular. It just is. It's unpopular with the American electorate in general. It's much less popular with Trump supporters than most of the policy decisions he makes. And so the feeling that this man who has built his political career around the idea that he would end the forever war, wars, that he would be the first president in the past century to be a true non-interventionist, that he then launched a war of choice in Iran at the same time that he started to talk about himself and present himself as a godlike figure. I could see how a lot of his religious supporters would start to wonder if everything they understand about him is just wrong.
Yeah, and I wonder if you couple that with the way Pete Hegseth talks about this war, Stu, the way J.D. Vance just justified criticizing the Pope, saying the Pope should really understand theology better, and that the religion does justify some wars. I wonder if you take all those things together, if that has an effect.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't meet a lot of people that really miss the Crusades. Like we'd be better off if we were in another crusade. And this seems to be an obsession with Hegseth, who's just one of the weirder people in public life that we've encountered lately. And he's such a dangerous person because he's Secretary of Defense. J.D. Vance is just a very strange guy. He went to Hungary to campaign for a guy who is against mixed race marriages, which would be his own family. Who goes, to another country to campaign for somebody who doesn't like your own family? So, I think Trump has just surrounded himself with these sort of freaks and weirdos that will do anything they can to encourage him. And there's sort of a bidding war over who can praise Trump the most in these embarrassing spectacles and cabinets. And it's, Republicans look at this and they go, what are we going to do with this? How do you run an election on this? And occasionally I find myself asking myself, what would I do if I was a Republican consultant? And man, it's not easy. I don't know what they're going to do.
Let me play Leader Thune and Speaker Mike Johnson. We're going to play both of them together, reacting to all of this stuff.
Do you think that having this back and forth going on is a good idea, considering there's a lot of Republican voters who are Catholic?
I'd stay focused on the administration, on the economic issues, the pocketbook issues that I think most Americans care about, and the church be the church.
Was it blasphemy?
I talked to the president about it as soon as I saw it, and told him that I don't think it was being received in the same way he intended it. He agreed, and he pulled it down. That was the right thing to do. He explained how he saw that, and I don't think he thought it was sacrilegious at all. So,
do you think he should back down?
I think he showed great respect to others that were moving it.
McKay, Mike Johnson is a deeply religious person. Does he lose some of his own authority by responding to that the way he did?
I don't know how it will affect him politically. I don't know how his Christian supporters will interpret that. I'm reminded when I see that clip and when I see, the comments that Vice President J.D. Vance has made, who is a Catholic, I'm reminded of the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus taught that no man can serve two masters. And I think we are seeing a lot of politicians right now in American life who are trying their darndest to serve two masters. And on a theological, spiritual, religious level, they know what's right. They know what blasphemy is. They know about just war theory. And they also know the political realities that demand that they stay loyal to Trump. And so they are trying to walk a tightrope. And what inevitably happens when political leaders try to walk that tightrope for too long is that they fall off it because people see it for what it is. They don't respect political leaders who are trying to, cozy up to their party boss while also maintaining a sheen of religiosity. You really have to pick.